Good evening, colleagues, and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Call-in Committee on today, Tuesday, the 7th of May. I'll begin by asking if we have any apologies. I've received two apologies from Councillor Waller, who's substituted by Councillor Wan, and from Councillor Rowley, who's substituted by Councillor Stewart. So, welcome. Before we move on to the main agenda as published, I've received some information this afternoon from the monitoring officer, which I think is pertinent to the how we proceed with this meeting. I understand Claire Full as the author of the report that went to executive that is subject to call-in to give us an update. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just read out a short statement and then we'll take it from there. So as part of the preparations for this evening's meeting, some new information completely unrelated to the grounds for the call-in came to light, which means that the executive decision taken on the 18th of April 2024 will no longer be implemented. Instead, an urgent report will be presented to the executive meeting on Thursday this week, that's Thursday the 9th of May, which will seek authority for a tender exercise. That decision will be subject to the call-in provisions in due course. In light of this, members may wish to consider whether they wish to proceed with tonight's call-in or to withdraw it and revisit the issue after Thursday's executive meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So just so I'm clear, so the recommendation that will go to an urgent item of business at executive this week will be to undertake a tender exercise. So that's
competitive tender exercise. That's
right. Okay. So that's the key difference compared to what was agreed. Okay. So in terms of where this leaves us as a committee, I am minded to postpone this meeting. If the decision that has been called in is not to be implemented, we could have a debate and call on the executive to have a rethink of a decision that is not going to be enacted. There's clearly going to be a paper which I haven't seen, which none of us have, that will go to executive this Thursday. So that's kind of my thinking, but I would invite comments from members of the committee if there's any thoughts or observations they have on how we proceed in these, to my mind, unique circumstances, not circumstances I've come across before. Members? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy to support your suggestion. I think the information we've given wasn't entirely clear. I'm not sure what information has come to light that's not relevant to the call-in, seeing as one of the reasons for the call-in was lack of information and not all the relevant information being present. So that actually does demonstrate that the call-in was accurate in terms of that sense. So I think it's good to be in a position where we're at, where we've actually been able to stop this decision from going ahead. But I think definitely support your suggestion that we don't go ahead with this meeting as is, as we're discussing something that will never actually be implemented.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
I was just going to echo your thoughts that it doesn't seem it will be very productive for us to continue, and I'm happy to support the suggestion.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of technically what I'm proposing we do, I'm proposing that we postpone this meeting. So I'm sorry, Councillor Stewart, sorry.
Just to ask the obvious, what is the new information?
I don't really want to get into a debate about to preempt what is in the paper that will go to executive on Thursday, which will hopefully make it apparent what new information is available that's caused the original decision to fall. I don't know if Claire, if there's anything additionally you want to say, but I'm not expecting you to, or Councillor Lomas. Yeah,
I'm not sure there's been anything circulated to other people, but I haven't had anything at all. So my question is, what has been obviously termed new information? Don't need to debate on it, just what is that information, please?
Yeah, again, I'm conscious that if we continue a line of questioning that may lead us into discussing restricted information, we'll then have to have a debate and a vote about going into private session. So if we can keep this at as high level as possible in terms of not going into detail that would then cause us to stop and have a vote about going into private session.
Without going into detail that will cause it to go into private session and keeping this at suitably high level, what is the new information, please?
Okay, it's really for the officer to talk to their report, sorry.
So the actual detail of the information is restricted, it's commercially in confidence. But by investigating the nature of the calling and the challenges that were put to us, we came across some additional information that has led to us revisiting the decision that we asked executive to make, which means that as soon as we found out that that information had influenced the decision that we asked the executive to make in a place where they didn't have the full information to hand, we approached the monitoring officer and asked him basically what the next steps should be, which was essentially discount the decision that went to executive last Thursday and instead put an emergency report in for this Thursday so that we're given the right information to executive. Then, of course, it's subject to call-in as any executive decision is.
Yeah, so I think we understand the effect of the new information in terms of one procurement path being stopped and a different procurement path, i.e. a competitive tender path being pursued. I think we know that outcome. Did you indicate, Councillor Eyre?
Just in terms of speeding things, then if we could have confirmation that will be sent to committee members after the meeting, that will save us having to discuss it in public.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Just ask for confirmation that the committee can be circulate that information in private after the meeting, in confidence.
No, it's still restricted until we progress the contract negotiations and gone out to competitive tender. So we haven't yet gone out to competitive tender because we haven't yet been to executive to ask for opportunity to do so for that decision. So that information that you've had around the market appraisal still remains restricted information.
Okay, but okay, so I suppose as and when, in the event a decision is taken and if that decision is called in and another meeting of this committee happens, any new information will be shared on the same basis, i.e. restricted.
So within the market appraisal, there's an assessment of the value of the place-based advertising, which is the basis for the contract negotiation in terms of what is the likely revenue to the council, and that is restricted because obviously we're trying to achieve the best value for the city rather than say this is what the market appraiser have told us it's worth, go and find out that. We're trying to get obviously a greater rate, so we don't really want to share the market appraisal any further. Thank you.
Councillor Lomas.
I think in response to Councillor Eyre's question, should the committee wish to call in the decision that is made on Thursday, that is of course your right, and appropriate information will be shared with you at that point in time. We absolutely risk straying into territory that shouldn't be shared in an open meeting if we carry on this discussion without going into a private session. And so I think that we're more than happy to make sure that appropriate information is shared during the meeting on Thursday, the meeting of executive on Thursday, which of course Councillor Eyre will be present at. And the role of the committee is to decide on the decision that executive made. We've been quite clear that that decision won't be enacted. So you can continue and ask us questions, but we'd need to go into private session to answer those questions. And the call-in is essentially moot because the decision that's being called in is not going to be enacted.
Yeah, I think we're clear that the decision is not going to happen. One further point, Councillor, then we'll move on.
I'm very confused by Claire's answer. So as we stand now, we could vote to go into private session and you would tell the committee what the reason is. But you then said that you won't tell the committee afterwards until the procurement. So you said even if we go into private session, you still won't discuss the reason for the court for this being withdrawn.
We can give you an outline of why it's been withdrawn because it obviously explains why the
Yeah.
decision made by executive last week isn't valid. What I don't want to do is share the market appraisal beyond the committee. So
All I was asking was that information that you'd be willing to share in private session about why this has happened could be circulated in confidence to members of the committee. Otherwise, my decision about whether to go into private session might change because I quite want to know.
yeah, I'd need to check with the monitoring officer.
I think that there are two steps here.
Mm.
We need to decide whether to postpone this meeting. I'm not asking the calling in members to withdraw their call-in because we haven't yet seen the information that will come through on Thursday that may cause an amended call-in request to be submitted or the original parts of the original call-in request might stand. But until we have that information on Thursday, we don't know. If we decide we don't want to postpone this meeting, we want to carry on, then we will have a debate and a discussion and a vote about whether to go into private session. So I think we've taken the debate around whether or not to postpone, I think, as far as we can without saying we want to go into private session for a full discussion on the call-in, which I personally think would be well, I say futile, pointless, given that the decision is not going to be enacted. Does anyone else want to say anything before I ask members to vote on whether they are content for this meeting to be postponed? No. Councillor Stewart.
I mean, personally, I think it makes entire sense to postpone the meeting. Absolutely agree with that. If the decision's not being taken, et cetera, no problem at all with that. But, and nobody is advocating having the market appraisal in public. But if we're likely to postpone the meeting, I can't really understand why I wouldn't go into private session to get the outline of the reason of the new information.
Because I'm not sure to what extent that would influence our decision as to whether or not to postpone the meeting. I think depending on what happens on Thursday, when the basis for the change in the decision will be known. I'm guessing that information might be restricted as well. It would be at the next meeting of this committee, if that subsequent decision is called in, that we would have that debate. I don't think that knowing that information won't influence the decision as to whether we postpone this meeting or not. It would be of interest, but in terms of what we're here to decide now, that maybe can be pursued via other routes, but I would argue not this meeting. Councillor Merritt.
I'd support what you're saying there, Chair. I think if we go into private and start going into some of this, then we're going to have to revisit all of that. If after the next Thursday, there is a continued or an additional call-in, I think it'd be far better to deal with the whole thing in one single go with the same people, one set of people around the table. So I'd like to suggest we just proceed with voting on your proposition, Chair.
Okay. This is an alternate proposition, Councillor Eyre, or a clarification?
Just waffling to effect that, Jack. My point was, in terms of clarification, is we shouldn't have got to the situation we're in. And part of our role as scrutiny is to try to work out why we've got to the situation we're in. My only concern about having the information was if this meeting doesn't go ahead, and as I fully agree, as it stands on the call-in, there is no purpose of this meeting going ahead. If, however, this committee will not be able to see the reasons and what happened and learn lessons from that going forward, then there is merit. Sorry, Councillor. There is merit in going ahead with the meeting just so this committee gets to see and understand what the processes were that led to it. But if we're going to be able to see those anyway and get a guarantee from officers that we'll be able to get that information and learning, then yes, we don't need to go on with the meeting.
Can I-
Go on,
Can I just comment on the debate around what you can see and what you can't see? Picking up on Claire's point about she would need to have a conversation with the monitoring officer, which I understand entirely. What I would suggest when you're having a conversation with the monitoring officer, Claire, is we need to look at the need to know provisions, because there is an argument from, you know, the fact that the committee have already, or members have already called this item in, they have already in effect established a need to know. And therefore that would mean that they would be entitled to that information, because largely speaking, the calling is going to be pretty similar because they're calling in the same item. So I just want to put that on the table so that when you do have your conversation with Bryn, you're having a conversation about what is already almost a pre-existing right to have that confidential information, unless it is substantially new.
Councillor Lomas.
Chair, I wonder if, in order to move on from this, what members are actually asking for is to be able to look at what happened and what lessons can we learn as an organisation from this. And I think that's a completely separate issue than the having disclosed to you at this point some of that information. So why, if the aim of the exercise is to understand what lessons are to be learned and what went wrong, for us to get to a point where we're saying we're not going to enact an executive decision, then shouldn't that be what Scrutiny look at separately? And shouldn't we report back to Scrutiny whether or not there is a call in on the decision next week and on Thursday? And I'm not presupposing there will or there won't be, but whether or not there is a call-in of the decision that is made at executive on Thursday, then this committee could ask for a report back on what happened during this process and what lessons can be learned by the organisation. And I think that would be far more productive than continuing going around in circles this evening.
Obviously, it'll be for the committee to decide what it wishes to scrutinise, but I see no reason why either this committee or potentially audit and governance, I'm not sure where it would sit, would want to take up that offer. So thank you. I think in terms of the point Dawn made around what information can be shared with members of this committee, as Dawn said, a sort of a need to know has been established, and I would be surprised if there were legitimate grounds for new restricted information not to be shared with members of this committee, regardless of whether a subsequent decision is subject to call-in. You know, as members, restricted information is shared with us, and we understand the nature of that information and how it should be used and how it should not be used. And as I would hope that would feature in the conversation you have with the monitoring officer in terms of if there were a reason why that couldn't be shared. I would want to understand what that is. Okay, so I'm going to ask members to indicate, please, whether they are supportive of the proposal that this meeting be postponed. If I can see all those in favour, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you, members. I apologise you've had a wasted evening, or you have an opportunity to get your evening back. But thank you for your attendance and good evening.